Okay, this demo is going to be about mapping the objects in your still life. And remember that you're going to make this frame to kind of help you understand. You're going to hold it up to your objects and kind of push it closer or further back in relation to your body to see basically how large these objects are translating onto your format edge. So the edge of your format frame is basically equating to the edge of your paper. Okay, and if you need more instruction on citing, I would go back to the citing PowerPoint. Also, there's 3 different videos on citing on the instruction page on Sakai for this assignment for mapping, so you can check those out too. The first thing I like to do when I am citing is draw my back center line where the tabletop or the horizontal plane is meeting the vertical plane or the back wall. Okay, and so I'm going to use my citing stick to determine how much space is taking up the picture plane for each of those different planes. So I determined that this is about the proportion. Oh, and also you can orient your paper either way. If you have really tall objects, you might want to flip your paper to here. But my objects are more spaced out. And I am doing still life number 3. And you can see those 3 different versions. I chose number 3. Okay, so I did the back line here. Drew that line in. Now I'm going to choose my landmark form. And my landmark form is the front piece of, it's like a little lidded jar. I'm just going to choose a different pencil as my citing stick so I'm not switching hands all the time. And that jar takes up, it's about, my measurement is here. But remember you're using relative measurements. So it's about 2/3 the height of, a little less than 2/3 the height of my top of the page. So I'm just going to draw a quick line delineating the top and the bottom and then a vertical line because this was an industrial made object that is symmetrical on both sides. I want this center line to make sure that each of those sides are symmetrical. So I'm going to begin by making just general shapes and figuring out the proportion of the widest points. And it tapers just a little bit. So see how I'm just dropping in lines first and then kind of making these shapes. The neck goes in a little ways, and then the kind of lip of the jar comes out. All right, now I'm going to draw the lid. So I'm really taking it in chunks. You're not trying to draw the whole thing at once. It's easier if you break it down into different shapes. It's a lot easier for you to kind of see what's going on here. So this is a shape, 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 this is a shape. So even though it seems like a pretty easy form, it's actually kind of complex with all of its undulations to the center point. Is it coming in or out of the center point? Okay, so I have my landmark form drawn. Great. And I can come back in and kind of, it's not exactly proportionate, are not exactly symmetrical at this point, but I can come back in and kind of fix that in a little bit. and I will. But you're really using those horizontal lines to kind of see if it's got a lopsided tilt or not. And that's pretty helpful. And you're always using these horizontal lines parallel to the edges of your paper and the tops and bottoms of your paper, and vertical lines to the left side and the right side to kind of figure if it actually is true or not. Okay, so I have this landmark form. Now I'm using this form to really determine the sizes and shapes of all my other objects. So this is kind of in the foreground, which is great because it's really easy to see. Remember, your landmark form, you want it to see it in entirety or almost entirety. So now I'm just going to kind of look at my objects and draw a little line where each of them hits the floor about. And this is going to help you kind of determine your spatial depth, your foreground, your middle ground, and then my metal cup is really in the background here and you can't really see it. But I know that that bottom of that metal cup needs to come just below this corner line because it can't extend back into the wall. If I put it right, the front side edge of this metal cup right here, that means that the entirety of the form would be kind of extending back into the wall, so I'm not going to do that. It's got to come, you got to give it space. So it's going to come about right here. And then my little top form is just a little bit lower or in front of the gourd form. So I'm going to put it maybe right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go through and use my sighting stick to determine the proportions of that gourd. And the gourd is great because it's kind of foreshortened, and you're going to have overlapping shapes too, and that's okay. I would actually draw them, continue the lines. See, this gourd form is behind this glass shape. And I do want to draw that, keep this line here, because when I'm shading this glass, you can actually see what's going on behind the glass. That's an important part of shading glass. So I'm going to keep that there for now. But then I have like the gourd form. Remember when we talked about foreshortening, it's really like stacking shapes. So if this is the center of my gourd, I'm going to draw, find that angle in which it is kind of coming back at a 3/4 angle. So it's not directly in front of me. If it was, then I would be drawing this like here, but it's actually kind of extending back to the left. So I'm going to use my sighting stick and rotate it like it's on a clock, hands of a clock, and find the angle at which it's kind of situated on the table. And it's just about this angle. Okay, so that helps me kind of find the center line of this gourd. So that back end of the gourd, I'm going to draw a circle for the back end of this gourd. It's going to look something like this. And it's okay if you have a lot of lines going on. You can erase them away later. Okay, so that's kind of the shape of the body of the gourd. I'm just going to erase some of these just so I don't get lost. And as soon as I erase these ones, this automatically pulls forward again, which is good. Okay, so now for this, I don't know what you call it, the stem part, I guess, of the gourd. This one's kind of a funky shape, so I'm really just looking for shapes here. And it's not really necessarily a shape that you can pinpoint. So you're just going to draw a bunch of different shapes together until it begins to start to look like it. And this just takes a lot of practice and potentially a lot of erasing, and that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to draw, that's my kind of gourd form for now. Now I have this flower vase, this little vase that is extending behind the gourd. So I'm going to use my sighting stick, my sighting pencil again to figure out how high it is compared to the gourd. Like, where does this high point come? Does it come just above the back end of the gourd? Is it parallel to the gourd? And I'm looking, using my sighting stick to figure that out. It's just above the gourd here. So if I draw a line all the way here, I know the top of this little vase needs to come to about that height. And it's kind of a soft triangle form. I'm just going to throw in that soft triangle, and then it's got a little opening here. And then my metal mug in the background. And if you'd like to, you can extend this all the way back if it helps you. That metal mug in the background also comes just slightly above this line. So I'm trying to figure out the height and drawing my center line. And this is how the kind of orientation I am to these objects. They're kind of at my eye level. So I can't really see the opening of this form. But if I could, remember you're going to draw it as a soft oval, not a football. You don't want these points to be like this because that's not realistic. You're still going to have a slight curvature if you were to see the openings of any forms. Okay? Maybe I'll just draw it like that so you can kind of see how that would look. So again, using my sighting stick to figure out the width of this compared to the width of this, or the width of this compared to the width of this, your landmark form. It's actually about exactly this width. So I went a little big here. But that also helps to push foreshortening because I know this object is smaller than this object, but because they're the same width, that tells me that this object is further back into space than that other object. And this curvature needs to always match this curvature. So if you ever have a curvature of the lip here, every single parallel line is going to match that curvature. And I can't see what's going on down below here because I actually have some fabric coming in here. So maybe I'll just draw that line in now. Finding this angle using my sighting pencil. I'm gonna draw in this handle. And good thing we already have practice with mugs, because that's helpful finding the proportion of the size of this handle to the actual mug. And you can also see how I'm using kind of sketchy lines to figure it out for these contour edges. Okay, now I'm gonna kind of come in. I've got, oh, I still have the flowers. I'll do that in a little bit because they're kind of coming on top of other things. So I'm gonna figure out this fabric. There's a little bit of fabric coming up in front of this vase form. A little bit of fabric coming back here. So to find this angle, remember I'm going to use my siding stick to say, okay, it goes this way and then this way, to kind of find this tricky bend in the fabric. And then I have this fabric making a bit of a curl, like a fold here, not a curl. And sometimes it's helpful to kind of lightly shade in the folded areas, just using your 4H pencil. Don't get crazy yet. So you don't get lost in those curves. Actually, that goes more here. Okay, so now I'm going to do my last object, the top. And it's kind of like sitting at an angle that's about 315, we'll say. And I was really measuring like the widest point there. It's kind of about this shape. And using this center line of the object. And sometimes, especially if the object is not upright, such as this one, the center line isn't going to be upright, right? You're going to use that center line to help you find the tilt of the object. And this form is pretty symmetrical on both sides, which is really helpful. There's a slight curvature to this. Okay, so now all of, oops, I have one more fabric line. And then just gonna map the plants really quick coming out of here. So I see that the ball, or the, I don't know what kind of flower that is, the little bloom part, comes about right here. So I'm just gonna draw that in and then meet the stem to where it goes into the vase, and this may take a couple tries. And then just giving that stem a little bit of thickness. And I'm gonna do all of this detail work of the flower because these it's composed of little tiny flowers in a tight formation. I'm gonna do all that detail work actually with the charcoal, so I'm not gonna get too crazy right now. But it can help you to kind of map out those little sections like this, just lightly. And then you won't get so lost in the charcoal. So just a quick kind of mapping here. And then it's also really important to draw what you see, not what you assume. So we think we know what these kind of leaves look like, but you really don't until you look and see it. So this is also just an experimentation of finding these different shapes, and this will also help you get this foreshortening down if you're finding all of these little different shapes. We have a little Okay, so I'm also kind of checking and seeing how far this point comes to the edge using my sighting frame, like holding the frame up to what I'm looking at and seeing. And it's important to lock your elbow so it's the same positionality every time, or else it'll be out of proportion. It'll be like a different ratio, right? Same with your sighting stick too. So that's generally what you're gonna do when you're sighting proportions. And now that I have like everything general down, I'm gonna go in and tighten up the form. I'm not gonna add value today. I'm just really honing in on these little tiny details, like how the lip meets the body, getting the shape of this handle right. Like maybe it's just slightly too far out. I'm going to do a little more work here. Maybe I'm going to draw in the lines of these textures just so when I'm shading, I don't get as lost in the form. So I know which directionality these lines will be going. I would like you to kind of keep in your searching lines or your structural lines, because that helps me know where you kind of got to what you've drawn. But if it helps you, you can kind of erase away things that are supposed to be behind other things. If it's glass though, I would keep what you can see through the glass at least. So here I can see what's through the glass because there's so much thickness going on with the stopper in this bottle. I can't see it here. So I'm going to erase this away to kind of help reinforce that this is coming forward. But remember, glass is kind of shading it. We're going to need to know what's kind of going on behind there. So I'm just going to adjust this. I think it's a little high. Looking back on it. All right, so you should have all of the forms pretty well fleshed out by next Monday. Also, I would like you to have the 3 images of your compositions, the different ways in which you arranged your pieces, those 3 images on the blog post as well. And there's videos in the instructions on Sakai for this assignment in case you need to kind of refresh on sighting and how to use your sighting stick and find proportions of objects. Yeah,